Hi, welcome back to the channel. We're here at Taverners Guitars. We're looking at buyer advice really for guitars. I teach a lot of students and their parents might go and buy them guitars, so this is out for the parents really that are going out and doing that for the first time, because I'm not saying it's a minefield. There's some pro tips here that we've got.
Absolutely. Well, you know, a lot of the guitars which we buy and we get through here are, in the nicest possible way, from probably the same source that a lot of you guys are looking at when you're buying, your son, daughter, cousin, friend, whatever, a guitar. And we have a lot of guitars that come through here that we literally spend hours, and I mean hours, into multiple days. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we put that into thousands of pounds of guitars. It can be a couple of £100 guitar where you put in a position where you meet a guy on his doorstep at 8 o'clock at night when he's finished work, and he hands you a guitar at the doorstep and you go, yeah, let's have a bit of that. And then you get it home and you wonder why everything above 12th fret sounds a little bit weird, or maybe your electrics don't work or whatever. And then you can turn what you thought was you're going to save yourself a few quid. In actual fact, you end up spending more money than you would have done buying a brand new one, because you've got to take it to someone like us who's going to charge you for getting it set up or fixing electric problems and anything else. So if you're doing that exercise and you're going to go and look at a guitar at someone's house, always, even if you can't play, get them to demonstrate it.
Yeah, get them to plug it in.
Well, let's start with electrics. So make sure everything works. Usually on a Les Paul or an SG or any sort of Gibson style product, you will have this configuration where you'll have a switch to either go between neck and bridge pickup, or in the middle is both, and you're going to have 2 volume controls and 2 tone controls. When you roll these off, it should make it sound darker. Muddier is the term a lot of people use.
Isn't it?
Muffled. It's like you've put a sponge over the microphone or whatever, and it makes it sound darker. And that's these 2 back ones. These 2 front ones should control the volume. So when you roll those back, it should become quieter or clean up, whichever terminology you want to use.
Clockwise turns them up, doesn't it?
Yeah, you go that way around, turns it up, and that way around, turns them off. If there's any crackling, if it's when you're moving those about, it can either mean there's just dirt in the pot and a simple quick rag back and forth like that can clear it out, or it means it might need a new one of those, which is going to cost you money. It's going to cost you money to get that repaired. The input jacks, obviously if you plug a cable in and you're getting intermittent sound,
they can be loose as well,
they can be loose.
So just check the...
It can be a quick fix, it can be a momentary fix, or it could mean that you might need a new one. Again, that's something to always look for. On Fender style guitars, on a Stratocaster, you've got 1 volume control, which is the most one, and 2 tone controls. And you'll have, again, just test those out and just make sure there's no crackling or anything like that. Telecasters are even more simple. They've just got 2 simple controls. We haven't got a telly around us, but they've got one, the forward one, the one closest to the neck of the guitar is the volume, and the one furthest back is the tone, doing a simple thing as these do. So that's always one thing to look at. Make sure that when you go on the switch between back and forth, that it's not like cracking or making a loud bang. Obviously you will hear that click, you will hear a click, because
you hear it move.
It's a latch switch, so you will hear it click. Make sure there's no real cracking when you go between it. Best way of doing it is move it slowly. Just do that. Just move it slowly, and you should hear a little bit of a pop, only marginally, but if you're hearing loud hissing, cracking, anything like that, there's a problem with it there. That's the electric side of things relatively covered. Always check out tuning pegs. This is something that a lot of people overlook on guitars. With tuning pegs, sadly, when you're playing away, or when you're in a band, or you're thinking you're a rock star for the night, and you turn around and there's a mic stand that someone's kindly put in the way, the first thing you're going to catch is either the headstock of the guitar or the tuning peg. So which means you can either end up bending a tuning peg, or you can break it entirely. Now if you do that, a set of Grovers like these, which are on Epiphones and on the Gibson stuff as well, you're talking 50, 60, 70 quid for a set of Grover tuning pegs. Yeah, it's an expensive thing, and usually you don't just buy one, you have to buy a set. If you've got a Gibson, you're talking 100, 125, 150 quid depending on them. And again, the other thing is, if you do have an older guitar, for instance, and this is a 2003 Korean made Epiphone, you can still buy these, but on some of them they don't make them anymore, which means it's even harder to get replacement parts for them. On things like fenders, they're in a line like this. Just make sure when you move them that they move as they should. They don't go round in like a circular motion.
They're not loose as well, so
yes.
Yeah, and they don't slip. So
they don't slip. That is always a thing to look for with that. And when it comes to the actual playability of the guitar, it's always, if you can, obviously, if you might not be in a position to do this if you don't play, but if you do play, just do the simple test and go all the way up the board. And the reason I picked this guitar is because this one is needing truss rod adjustment. So things like that there is not what you want to hear.
That note is just choking out.
Yeah, it's choking out on the fret above it. That's even worse.
There's no note there.
And that one's even worse up there. And this one's just freshly into us, so we haven't had a chance to do anything with it yet. So I picked this up as an example. It will not go unnoticed. But as you get higher up in that fretboard, you'll hear that. And that means that this will either need potentially a raise of action. Looking at the action, it looks fine to me, so it wouldn't need a raise of action. This will need either a truss rod adjustment or it will need a fret leveling. Now, fret leveling is an art form. It's a time-consuming process and it's expensive. To get trained people to do a fret level on a guitar, you're talking 60, 70 quid minimum to just do a fret level on a guitar. So if you think you're going to save yourself a few hundred quid in buying a guitar of this sort of thing, yes, you can. Or it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely check that. That's probably the most important one.
Absolutely.
I would say. Just on the action. Sometimes you get the same note as well as you go up. So it's like, as you're going up, they all sound like that as you ascend up the neck.
As you go up the neck.
I normally do a bend as well, which is, I guess if whoever's getting it knows how to do a bend.
Yeah.
Just do a nice bend on the 17.
And that one's fine. This one.
Nothing.
You can hear that.
It's called a buzz out, isn't it?
It's buzzing out. It's buzzing out, and it just, again, it isn't curtains for a guitar. It isn't, because that's what happens. They just need a bit of TLC. Most
stuff's fixable, isn't it? Really.
Absolutely.
So but you've just got to be prepared to deal with that if you're going to have to deal with it.
And then the other one next to me just here is one that's literally just come into us that we'll be getting a full going over. And this one here, in my opinion, hasn't been stored particularly well, but with our keen eye, I didn't see any problem in pulling it back. And what you've got there is what they call a high action. So on this specific guitar, the strings are quite high. Now, that can mean that the bridge is either quite high, or it can mean that over time the neck has got a bow in it, which means that the neck has gone that way. And that's why you have a truss rod in guitars, which counteracts the tension of the strings to pull it back around. This needs a truss rod adjustment.
Always get a guitar with a truss rod. So no matter what it is, you need to check that it has a truss rod. So they're either located at the top here or at the bottom section.
Yeah.
Most of the time they will be at the top.
Most of the time they'll be up here. They'll be underneath this part of the guitar or underneath this. The Gibsons have bells, what they call a bell on it. And underneath the bell truss rod cover, there will be a box span or an Allen key or something like that. You can adjust it. All I will say is if you've never done one before, it's probably best to bring it somewhere that will know what they're doing when they adjust it. Unfortunately, we had an incident the other day with a bass. A chap brought it in for a setup. We had it on the bench. We did everything that was humanly possible to get the truss rod to cooperate, and it didn't. That bass, sadly, was finished, was over. And that is the end of that guitar. You can go and you can change a neck. You can change a truss rod. But I can guarantee you, unless you've got £1,000 plus guitar, it will not be worth it.
Yeah,
it will cost more than the guitar will be worth. On all three of these guitars here, and all these behind us, sadly, if they needed a new truss rod, it would just be, the best advice I would give is get a new guitar. It just wouldn't be worth it. But not to scare anybody too much into not buying a second-hand guitar, but I would just say that these are some things that you really do need to have a look.
I would say in my lifetime, I've never come across a guitar with a broken truss rod. I don't see a lot. No. I've seen plenty of guitars in my life, but obviously you turn over hundreds.
Well, we see it. We do see it. We do see it where people think they know what they're doing, and they over tighten them, and then they hear the dreaded crack, bang, whatever it is. And basically it means that they've stripped the thread on the truss rod and that's it.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it's a horrible thing to see, but it does happen. And guitars like all these here, this is a £250 guitar. That's a £250 guitar. This one's slightly more Epiphone custom made in Korea. This is about £400 guitar. They are all fabulous guitars once they've had that final going over, which will be happening to them. They're all fresh in stock at the minute, so they haven't had any of that work yet. And also, just be aware that there is some things on a guitar that you might see that you think are curtains for guitars, when it isn't. One thing to always think of, and I see this all the time at guitar shows, is that people look at Fender type, for instance, or Fender specifically, is they look at, in the neck pockets down here, you can always see a little crack, a little line here. We've got a few guitars that do have this in. Everyone will look at that and go, forget it, not having it. All that is simply where the lacquer is on the body there. Yeah. As it's connected, obviously you've got a neck that's bolted to the body. It does not mean that the body has got a crack in it. It is 99 times out of 100 just simply where, with finishes that are polyurethane, it become very brittle over time and they do crack. However, on these sort of guitars, this sort of guitar here, if you do see a crack, probably best to leave it alone. It is usually on these sort of guitars with set necks and things like that, and especially with headstocks like this, if you do see any sort of cracking, that's where you don't want it. But on the Fender stuff, if you do see a little mark just in there, does not necessarily mean that guitar has got a cracked body. It usually just means it's got a little bit in the lacquer, which is perfectly fine.
Trying to think, what else?
What else would I say? With floating trem systems like this, just always have a look at how flat your trem is to the guitar. If it's really like this sort of position like here,
pulled all the way
where it's pulled all the way over, it's an easy fix, but it's an easy fix for someone that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, it will need the springs adjusting.
Need the springs adjusting, and then it will need resetting up with the tension of the strings and everything else. Sometimes on these saddles here, especially on these sort of ones with these little Allen key grub screws in them, if it looks really badly corroded, the chances are that the thread in there will be absolutely toast.
From my experience,
yes.
I had that exact thing happen to my USA Fender Strat.
Yeah.
After about 10 years of ownership, I have got that kind of thing in my DNA where my sweat just corrodes everything. So, you know, I had a brand new PRS and I started corroding it after 3 months.
It does happen. Yeah. It does happen. People do have more acidic sweat than others. It's just nature of the beast with them.
But I had to have the all new bridge saddles and everything.
It cost a fortune.
It cost a fortune.
Yeah, it cost a fortune. Yeah. So just have a look at them. Look, they're going to get rusty because that's what happens. But if they look specifically like they're about to crumble to pieces, probably best that you either renegotiate your price ever so slightly and go, look, I think that might be a problem. Don't be scared of that. Don't ever be scared. If you're going to go and buy a used guitar, if it's been described as being however, if you do spot something, just say, I don't think that wants to be or anything like that. It is always better to put your money into something that's sound than something that isn't. And of course the obvious one with any used guitar is fret wear. And the best way to just look at it is just bend the string over. Usually the G string is usually the main spot where you'll see fret wear on guitars. So all you've got to do is just separate the strings slightly in that sort of way, and it's usually between 1 and 7 is where you see most of your wear, and just pull it apart and just have a little look at your frets. And if you've got major dents or any undulations like that in your frets, again, some people, they'll look at it and go, that's fine, they can polish it out, they can buff it out, they can level it out and it'll be fine. But sometimes if you've got too much of a dent in there, you're going to have to take too much fret off, at which point the guitar will need refretting. A little bit like a truss rod incident. Sometimes that'll be more than the guitars.
My USA Strat's ready for
Same
that.
thing, yeah,
and,
okay, cool.
It's now a slide guitar.
Now a slide guitar. So, to get the action up and it'll be alright.
Until I can sort it.
Yeah, it is. So these are just some of the things to look for. And sadly, and the horrible thing is that, of course, there are many fakes out there.
Oh, the fakes.
The fakes.
So, Chibsons and Chapiphones.
Yes, yeah. Weirdly enough, Fender stuff, I don't see many fakes off, which is weird.
Chenders.
Yeah, Chenders. Okay. So with Fender stuff, I personally don't see many fake Fenders, which is weird because you think they'd be the easiest to fake because they're much easier to build than one of these are.
I think it's a cultural thing. I think
it's
there's groups of people who just want a Chibson.
They do, and And there's this thing of with the fakes at the minute, I'm actually seeing, from buying a lot of guitars, and of course that's what we do, or what I do, pretty much every day of the week, I don't see many fake Fenders. I'm not saying they don't exist, because they do. I don't particularly have ever seen a fake Squire.
Isn't that a fake Fender?
So ignore that one. Yeah, I mean, look, and look, I fell into my own trap. I've just sat here and explained to people how to do it. I bought a guitar from a guy that I bought several guitars of. I won't name. And I went to his house, and I was in a mad rush because I was going somewhere. I was doing some band work, and he had them in the bags, and I went, yeah, fine. And I threw him money, and he put these two guitars and an amplifier in the back of the car. And I got back here, and I realised that the Fender in question has a replacement neck on it.
Oh.
Didn't know that until I opened the bag here. Well, look, yes, you might be of a kind that goes, oh yeah mate, yeah, I've just got this Fender, but I thought, well, you know what, sadly, it's my guitar now. I've handed over the money, I've walked away from his house, it's been in a bag, it actually probably spent the night in here without me looking at it, because obviously I was playing with the band. Opened it the next day and thought, great.
Thing is though, that's not the same as a Chender or a,
no, it's not.
It's not the same as a guitar that was imported as a knockoff.
No,
it's a guitar. It's just had a replacement.
It's had a replacement neck, and there's a reason before. There is a reason why that specific guitar over there has had a replacement neck to it, and it's because the original ones had a really big V style neck on them.
Oh right.
Again, not to everyone's taste, so it's had a replacement on it. But weirdly enough, the brand, and you will be surprised at this, the brand that I see the most fakes of are these two things here, which are Epiphones. And there's a reason for this. There's a whole YouTube video on it, and there's a whole Facebook group about this. Things on Gibsons, for instance, the headstock rate, which we spoke about in a previous video, where the headstock angle leans back, the fret nibs up the side of the fretboard, those are things which are incredibly difficult to fake. Getting a one piece of wood and a Gibson necks or a one piece of wood and then having it raked back is just not cost effective. So Fenders, for instance, they're never faked. Fenders have got pretty much every price point covered, down to a £100 guitar up to a, God knows, master built at several thousand quid. So they don't really see many fakes of those. But there are plenty of Epiphone fakes. And I'll talk you through just a few things to spot on an Epiphone fake. And weirdly enough, it's the customs I see more of than anything else.
Yeah.
It is. And I'll just pop that just over there. We'll just start with the reason, the obvious things to see. And the first thing is usually the bridge. These pole pieces here will be domed. The control knobs, when you look at them, when you look at that guitar, you should see that these will run parallel with the fretboard. Now on the Epiphonies,
Epiphonies, that's better than a Chepiphone.
They run and they're like that. They're on an angle to the fretboards. They run on a diagonal line.
So they kind of converge away.
Yeah, if you look at that, those two are straight up. They will run parallel. If you put a ruler through those, it will run up. On the fake ones, they're on an angle. Pickguard screw is usually right on the edge, so it's right over there. When it comes to the headstock, usually you can see some anomalies with them. Everyone thinks that with this here, if it's slightly on an angle, it's not real. That's just how it is. It's sadly, you look at it, it is always slightly on a little bit of an angle, even on the real ones. The thing to look for is on the side of the headstock, this binding here should be really narrow. On the Epiphonies, it covers half of the headstock. You'll have half white and half black. Yeah, and also the serial number, they're usually a 2006, 2009 period they were doing this with. And the first bit of the serial numbers with those EE means they're made in China. The EE will be bigger than the rest of the serial number. So you'll see EE big and the rest of the serial number will be small. It should be like on this one where it is a U, which means it was made in Korea. It should be all the same size. Now you argue and go, well, all right, people say, well, what's the point in faking Epiphones? The reason they did it was far easier to fake one of these than it would be in a more expensive guitar. You know, it was far easier to fake them. And let's just say a box of 20 of these were coming into the UK. Well, what they'd do is they'd take one out, then you get 19 real ones, but you get one fake one. Of course, they did that 20 times. They've got a free box of guitars. So they'd build up an extra box of guitars, for instance, and they were being sold by
legit shops.
whatever, legit big companies that were selling them without even knowing that they were selling them, because they just maybe notice a thing and go, well, it's a mass-produced guitar, it's just an anomaly.
You wouldn't question it.
You wouldn't question it. The sad thing is with them is when you actually open them up and you look at the bodies, they literally, the routing inside literally looks like a squirrel has been really hungry in there.
Oh right.
They are nibbled away. They look terrible. They're just plywood, they're just built awful. The electrics using, and this is even something to the extent they go to. This is one thing I've seen on a forum recently. Guy took his pickups out and they goes with stamped Epiphone on the back. Why would they do that? Well, they did. They stamped Epiphone on the back of the pickups. They went to that extreme of doing that.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing just to be careful of. There is so many of these about that are fake. It is actually scary to the amount of these that are around that are fake. And it's not just customs, it's standards as well. It's even the classics, it's even SGs and other models of Epiphone. So that's the one thing to be very careful of. Yeah.
Fantastic, yeah. So that's a good roundup of things to look for. And I think that's... I'll do a piece on how to look for one on Marketplace as well, because there's a lot of people out there trying to scam as well with prices that are too good to be true, and
yeah, sadly there is that at the minute, and it's an influx. You will post it, the courier service. I'll send my brother over with the money and all that sort of stuff. There's plenty of those, and sadly, the one place where people were safe was Reverb. Right. But they've even gone over to there now,
really?
And there is scams on Reverb. Yeah, it is. They're everywhere. So. The best way, and it's going to sound very old-fashioned here, but the best way is pound notes, and you come to me, and that's how it is. And that's how I buy guitars, because at least I get to look at them, and I don't have to potentially run the risk of being hurt in a car park and someone running away with my money. You go to somebody's house or whatever, and if something seems too good to be true, It usually is, and there's a whole heap of horror stories in that bag which I won't go into, where people have had money taken off them, or whatever it might be. So yes, be very careful. Obviously, there's a lot of good guitars out there on Marketplace. There's a lot of good people selling good guitars who just want to sell their guitar and buy another one. They want to sell it and pay the bills. Who knows? Whatever reason they're selling their guitar for, but at the same time, there is a lot of them. People out there.
Normally denoted by the too good to be true price.
Exactly.
I always find
too good to be true. Yeah,
and then it starts becoming a whole complicated series of events to try and even get the guitar. So it's just it's not worth it.
Not worth it. But there is, like I said, there's plenty of good guitars out there. And if you do ever get a guitar that you think, oh, I've dropped a whatever here, then I've dropped a clanger, just know there are people out there that fix guitars. It's not going to cost you the earth. Yeah, you might not have got the best deal that you thought about originally, but there is no point spending £200-300 on a guitar and then just putting it in the bin. Chances are it might only need 50 quid spending on it to pull it back into line.
Yeah. There's a massive difference between the weight of these guitars, the way they feel, the scale length, how tense the strings are. So, and some people, like my first guitar was a Stratocaster type guitar, and that set me up in a certain direction of playing. When I finally did play a Gibson, that kind of felt quite natural, and I kind of wished I'd have had a Gibson for a long time. I think your journey was kind of
the opposite.
The opposite, yeah.
Played a Les Paul, and then I played everything else and went, no, I like that, and I've always liked that, and I've always stuck to it. But, like you said, get the guitar in your hand, sit with it, feel it, and don't, if you go into some music shops, and this is something I hear a lot of, and it scares the bejesus out of me, people go to a lot of the big music shops out there, and they just don't give them any time. They just put a guitar in their hands, and they're stood over them going, well, are you having it? And it's like, you can't be doing that. And I like to think here, especially here, if you come here and you just want to sit and play guitar, just do that. I might be around, I might be asking you if you're alright, but really, it's just out of courtesy. I'm not here to rush anybody about when it comes to picking their next guitar, because at the end of the day, it's a path. If you buy the wrong guitar and you're trying to learn to play guitar, just because your hero plays one of these does not mean it's the guitar for you. And a lot of people make that mistake.
Yeah.
Don't forget to subscribe!
Yeah. So yeah, if you're looking for the big Dimebag Darrell guitar, You might realise that Dimebag Darrell probably didn't start with that guitar. Probably started with something more like this or like that.
Yeah.
And then worked his way around and then got the cool looking spiky guitar or whatnot.
Yeah.
You know, and that's kind of how it happens. It is very journey led. And I've always been under the. I think Les Pauls are just as versatile as a Strat, really. But
so, yeah.
you know, in different directions with a Strat kind of thing. You know, I got into funk and playing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, but then when I got my Les Paul, I really went into the rock kind of realms. So it just they inspire you in different ways. So it's definitely worth trying a few and then deciding. And there's all these kind of places, especially this place. There's so many guitars in different price ranges. So if you're limited on a budget, you know, that's no problem. We can look at what that budget is and work from there.
Get the best guitar you can, and the ultimate thing, as we've just said there, when you go out and you buy a second-hand guitar from somebody, there's no guarantee what you're going to get. We have a place here. I wear, clothing with the name on. I'm not scared of anything. I would like to think if anyone bought a guitar from me, even if they sit here for an hour and played it, and they got back and they sat there for the next week going, I really shouldn't have bought that. Then come back, phone up, go, hey, can I do something with it? Can I bring it back? And providing you haven't, used it as a dartboard, yeah, absolutely. Because I've been there myself. We've been there. We've been on the journey. I walked into a music shop, bought a guitar, and then a week later gone, really shouldn't have done that. And you just, that's part of it. And I didn't take it back or anything because I never thought that would be an option. But genuinely, that is something that I'm personally very happy to do. And I know there are other music shops out there that are, but I think some of the maybe big keychain ones probably aren't so much that, especially if you buy a brand new one. If you buy a brand new one and you take it out of its case or its box and start noodling about in it for a week,
it's become second hand.
Well, that's a second hand guitar. Yeah, it's not going to be new anymore. So
that's it. Thank you. Don't forget to like and subscribe.